The wait is over. The provisional 2025 MotoGP calendar has been released, and it's time to gear up for a year of unparalleled excitement. The schedule has certainly been shaken up with a historic kickoff in Thailand and the return of Brno in the Czech Republic, as well as the Hungarian Grand Prix after 32 years of absence. With 22 races across 18 countries and some dream destinations like Indonesia, Japan and Malaysia, next season is set to be one of the most heart-pounding in MotoGP history. And you can be there to witness it all. Just head to motogp.motogppremier.com to see the full schedule and all available packages. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to the OMG MotoGP podcast with myself, Harry Benjamin, former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Ewan, and Crash.net MotoGP editor Pete McLaren. What year is it? Where are we? We're back together again as schedules have aligned. It's lovely to see your faces as always. Pete, it's been a while since you've been on OMG. How are you getting on? How are you taking stock of this this quite epic season so far?
It is, isn't it? Yeah, no, it's an enjoyable one. It's a long season again, isn't it? But yeah, it's all very up and down at the moment, isn't it? I think it's strange. I'm sure we'll get onto it later, but to have two guys at the top of the championship fighting each other in terms of the points, but actually not really on the racetrack that often. It's quite strange, isn't it? But let's hope it's building towards a big crescendo and a big finish in these next 3 rounds.
Yeah. You talk about two blokes trying to give the championship to each other is what you mean, really, isn't it? I mean, it's a very, very odd season from that point of view.
This is the thing, isn't it, Keith? I mean, Jorge Martin, after the sprint, the pendulum swung back in Pecco's favour, and you think, oh my God, I can't believe he's thrown it away. And then after the Grand Prix, okay, Jorge recovered and his first Sunday win since, May? But Pecco still took very good points. The gap is 21. It could have been double that if Jorge Martin had kept it on the road in the sprint. Do either one of these riders want to win the championship? Who's going to take the title? How many rounds we got? 6 to go, something like that. 5 to go.
5. I think what it is. I think the complexity of MotoGP nowadays, I think, is evident. I think for me, it's you've had rider height adjustments that have been a problem. The tyre problems, and of course that raised its ugly head again this weekend with possibly the Acosta tyre thing. And I've not got... it's going to be really interesting to hear what Pete has to say about this, but the Michelin thing, where they've got a brand new tyre that they were going to bring out and the riders quite liked, but then all of a sudden they're not going to bring it out now, which I think is pretty short-sighted, personally. I mean, there's got to be reasons for that behind the scenes that we're not party to, but it doesn't make sense to me when we're still having this tyre. It will be a disaster if we go into the next 5 rounds, given the way things have gone. They're to and fro, and then we have a tyre penalty that basically wipes out somebody's points, and we have a falsifying of the points over the entire season. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But it worries me. I mean, sooner we get rid of these ride height adjustments and all the rest of it, and less aero and so on, and get it back to proper motorbikes, I think will be better for the series. Roll on 2027 for that anyway.
Well, I tell you what, Pete, I'm just wondering if you can sort of explain it for me more than anybody else, because it can get a bit confusing. Just where, in terms of penalties and tyre pressures, where we were at coming into Indonesia, and then what exactly was going on in the stewards' room post-race.
Yeah, so you get this sort of ticker that pops up at the end of the race now, which sort of warns that people are under investigation for tyre pressure. So that's sort of relatively new. Previously, we just had to wait until the stewards gave their report at the end of the day. Now, actually, at the end of the race, you get on the live broadcast sort of a warning. And normally, the riders whose names are flagged there, they do end up getting a penalty. Now, on this occasion, we had the 3 riders that it came up were under investigation. So Acosta, Nakagami and Binder. But we actually ended up with 3 different results in each case. So first of all, we had Acosta, who was, if you like, acquitted. They said that there was a leaking tyre rim. And so that was why he was under, but would not be punished. Now, it's down to the discretion of the technical director to decide. So Danny Aldridge obviously looked at it and said, yeah, that's damage from the racetrack, that's that. We were initially told then that the decisions on Nakagami and Binder would be made before or at the next event, which is in Japan, this coming weekend. Now, obviously, that was a bit of a surprise. It just said due to the nature of the technical checks. They need to double check that the data that they got in real time is correct. But it just seemed an awful long time to wait for the results, for another potentially 5-7 days. Then, not long afterwards, it was updated. It turned out the checks had been done, and Binder got sort of no penalty. They decided that there hadn't been an infraction, as they call it. Now, it seems from what Binder said that the data on their bike, the KTM data that was recording the tyre pressure, said that they were all clear. So there was some sort of issue with the transmitting of the live data, and that was why he was under investigation. But when they checked the actual figures, if you like, he was okay. Finally, Nakagami, he was under, it seems. So he did get the penalty. Now, the trouble with Nakagami, but the reason you should feel a little bit unlucky for him is 9 guys crashed out of that race. So Nakagami was riding on his own. He had nobody near him. There was no way the team could have predicted there would be all these people crashing out or not finishing. Marquez obviously had the engine problem. So there was big gaps. So he had fresh air on the tyre that they wouldn't have expected. The tyre gets cooler, the pressure goes down, and he ends up with a penalty. Now, he might have had a warning on his dash. Obviously, we don't know because Nakagami didn't speak after this penalty because it was late in the day. He might have got a warning on the dash, but what could he do? He would have had to slow down 5 seconds to let the one rider that was behind him, Alex Rins, go ahead, then follow him to try and raise the pressure again. Really, he's just in an impossible situation there anyway. So that's the long and short of the penalties, if you like, from Sunday.
It's ludicrous. It should never happen. It's driving us all completely round the bend. I mean, I can just imagine Danny Aldridge out with his bottle of foamy water, fairy liquid water, squirting the rim of the front of Acosta's bike, looking for bubbles to see if it was leaking. There's got to be a more technical way of doing it, but I can't think of a better way of doing it. If you've got a leak in a tyre, you get your foamy water out and you give it a squirt and you see if it's just daft. It is just daft. I mean, what it needs to be, if we're going to have this situation, we need a starting point, and that's as long as they're over whatever that is at that particular point at the beginning of the race, and they've got the technology now to be able to check that. That's it. Wherever it ends up at the end of it is where it ends up. It's ludicrous that we've got this situation as it is at the moment. I mean, I didn't even know there was a dispensation for something like Acosta's leaky rim. I mean,
I think it's just up to Danny Aldridge to. It says the technical director's decision is final as far as meeting the tyre parameters, because as you say, Keith, it's not written down. It's not in black and white. The numbers for the pressure. It's just down to the teams following basically.
That surprises me. That surprises me that Danny would leave himself open to exposure in that way, and that kind of and the sports criticism in that way. I mean, when you've got that kind of autonomy in a rule, decision maker, I think it's when is a rule not a rule? It's when Danny decides otherwise, and that seems very, very odd to me that he would expose himself to that kind of criticism. But I don't know. I haven't been able to speak to Danny because they were all on aeroplanes as fast as they could be out of Indonesia. Obviously, off to Japan, the next one. Fernandez got an 8-second penalty in the sprint race. You get 8 seconds because it's half the penalty, because it's half the race. Nakagami got a 16-second penalty in the Grand Prix because it's double the race, double the penalty. But either way, it was a bloody nightmare. Acosta rode brilliantly, and it wouldn't be down to tyre pressure. I can't imagine it being it's the tiniest margins we're talking about here, and it's only over. Is it 60% now of the race? It has to be.
Yeah, that's right, Keith. But as you say, we don't get the actual figures as to how much somebody breaks the rule by, do we? So we don't know how close they are. It could be a fraction. It could be a lot. Obviously, in Acosta's case.
How many times have we talked about this transparency, Pete? How many times have we talked about we need this transparency? I looked at the timeline. You see the WhatsApp group that's on for you media guys, and then the timeline on that was hilarious. I had to stop myself from joining in. You got Michael Scott and everybody else all criticising and making funny comments about, and you can be sure that it's multiplied around the world. Everybody's making funny comments about it or getting upset by it. But the media centre WhatsApp timeline was absolutely hilarious as they were trying to make sense of what was being given to them. In the smallest possible amount of information was coming out of the FIM and out of IRTA and out of Dorna. It's wrong. It's just wrong.
And I have to say, this is where us website guys, we are lucky. If we were like you two guys with the TV, and you can understand if you're on live TV and you're under pressure and you want to give your viewers the result, don't you? Or you're a print guy or something who's under deadline, you need to know the result. And that's when, for us, we can sit back on the website. If we've got to work all night, we work all night, but we're not under that sort of cutoff point that you guys are with live stuff. So yeah, it's far from ideal, isn't it?
It's also boring. Tyre pressures are boring at the end of the day. It's not the kind of thing that we need to get especially when you've got a Grand Prix that was a massive success. I mean, Lombok, very difficult to get to, but I mean, the track itself, I mean, our guys, Driven International, who we had on during the week, Ben Wilshire and co. I mean, at the end of the day, they must be so happy with the comments that were coming from riders, spectators, television. The track is a massive success.
Track was good, Keith, but I tell you what, the turnout wasn't great.
60,000 on the day. It's a very difficult place to get to. Lombok is not an easy place to get to for anybody outside of the region. We're talking about Indonesia. It's not a rich country in the main, without being too derogatory about it. I thought, 60,000 on a Sunday for a place that's quite isolated still. It's still coming of age, that region, really, isn't it, as a destination. So I thought 60,000 wasn't bad. I tell you what, Silverstone would take 60,000.
Let's not. Let's leave that there. we're not going down that rabbit trap. Absolutely not. Rabbit hole even. Let's move on. Let's leave penalty and tyre pressures there, shall we? I think everyone's pretty much in agreement that something needs to change there. Bastianini and Marc Marquez, are we officially ruling them out of an outside title run contention after the weekend?
Well, for my money, yes, definitely with Mark. We questioned, whether he'd be able to keep up that kind of race-winning performance on a 23 bike. So, yeah, I think you've got to say, Bastianini comes good late. He's but he's still, how far off of it is he? 54 points back for Bastianini. It can still be done. Yeah, no, there's five races still to go, but those two at the front have got to clash a little bit more substantially to get Bastianini back into the frame. It's not, mathematics. You've only got to look back a couple of years when Pecco won his first, and he came from a long way back, and it can be done. But I don't know, nowadays it seems more tricky. It's more about who makes mistakes. That's the problem. You've got all the time now. It's who is going to make the mistake. And with these, 5 races being reasonably close together, you only need the slightest of injuries. Although Pecco, I've got to say, he does take a beating and come back, doesn't he? Bagnaia. What would be called Bagnaia.
It is teed up to be a pretty exciting end of the season, especially if they sort of each one seems to not want to win it as well. So throwing it away every other day. Pedro Acosta, you mentioned him a little earlier, and talk of firsts. Is that first win going to come before the end of the year, Pete?
It wasn't looking like it, but then the performance on the weekend, I mean, to be only 1.4 seconds, was it? I think, 1.4 seconds behind Martin after 27 laps. I mean, I think that's really impressive, and certainly not ruling him out. Yeah, I mean, we're into this flyaway run now. Indonesia was the first of them, where we've got all this unpredictability and things like that. And I think, he's building confidence. He seems to be back happier with the feeling of the bike, the setup, and things like that. And he's really carrying the flag for KTM at the moment, isn't he? And there's a lot of sort of changes going on. We now have Aki Ayo confirmed as their future team manager. That'll be a boost for Acosta as well, because he's somebody that Acosta obviously raced for coming up through the Grand Prix ranks. So that'll be someone in his corner that he knows very well. Binder also raced for Aki Ayo, so that'll be a familiar face. But yeah, I think, I was starting to think that it wasn't going to happen this year for Acosta. Because at the start of the year, we all thought it's just a matter of time, didn't we? I mean, there he was in, Kota leading the race and on the podiums, the back-to-back and that kind of thing early on. Then the big lull, also reflection of the KTM bike. But yeah, I think there's a decent chance that he can sort of mix it up. Also, bear in mind that the closer we get to the finale, the more sort of careful, talking about mistakes, as you guys mentioned, Martin and Bagnaia are going to have to be. It's guys like Acosta, also Marc Marquez. They can throw caution to the wind a little bit, can't they? So if they do get half a chance, if it's dodgy conditions, half wet, half dry or something, why not take a gamble?
Love the way KTM are squaring off things as well. Francesco Guidotti, we'd heard that obviously he was on his way out by the end of the year. That was confirmed by KTM running into Indonesia. But then there was a Danny Pedrosa rumour about him becoming team manager. But thank heavens, he sticks us wherever he is. And we get Aki Ayo, as you just mentioned, Pete, which is a very, very important... that the Finn, he is one of the men for me. The way his management style is, that absolutely level, calm, really accurate thinking, and he's brought on some great riders over the time. You can see how KTM will definitely benefit from him being upgraded to team manager. Not that, actually, having said that, Guidotti was a good team manager, but I think Aki Ayo might just be able to bring some consolidation to KTM at the moment. They seem to have just got a bit lost. It seems to have gone a bit wayward for KTM. So I can see Aki Ayo's standard of team management just dragging that all back down into a more focused group, perhaps.
I mean, it seems like there's a few of those teams that have, we've talked about Aprilia in the past, seem to be a little bit lost about where they are at the moment going forward. I mean, Aleix Espargaro was one of the riders taken out in the first lap crash, wasn't he? And took out however many it did.
Miller took him out on his 250th Grand Prix. Lucky Aleix. I mean, Jack Miller, managed to cause Aprilia. Aprilia can't get a run at it at the moment, which I think they must be now thinking to themselves, okay, we need now to try and get just some decent results towards the end of the year. But even across the Trackhouse, it just isn't working for them on every level at the minute. On the other side of that, if we skip away with the negatives and move to the positives, what about Yamaha? I mean, the announcements and everything that's coming out of there at the moment, I mean, bravo. I mean, it makes me feel good sitting over here in the good old UK miles. Honestly, I mean, I thought Yamaha was done and dusted a few months ago. I thought that lot, they're going to have a struggle to come back. They're going to need a huge budget. And here they are, changes of personnel, budget being thrown at it, V4s being cooked on the back burner, back in the factory. Just fantastic news for me, Pete. I don't know what it feels like in the paddock.
It is, isn't it? As you say, the commitment that they're putting in, there's no doubt about it now, is there? And there's been hints, haven't there? At the start of the year when Quartararo signed, he said that he sort of made hints about things going on behind the scenes. And I asked him about it. I think he was around Barcelona, and he sort of brushed away as, he didn't want to say what was going on. But I think clearly this V4 has played a part in it. We know Max Bartolini coming from Ducati is another big part in Quartararo, deciding to sort of pledge his future. But yeah, there was a lot of question marks, wasn't there, when Quartararo re-signed? Everyone saying, why has he done this? And I think now we're starting to see all of these things fall into place, the commitment that is there. Of course, let's remember, Quartararo, though, only has, if you like, a 2-year contract extension. So at the moment, nobody is signed for the start of the 850cc era, which is coming in 27. So this V4 project, presumably, if it proves quicker, they say if it proves to be quicker than the inline, they'll bring it in. So they'll have 2 engine programs at the same time. Then, if and when the V4 is better, they'll bring it in. But then also, they're going to have to presumably have some other engine projects for the 850cc era. So massive amount of work going on there, I think.
Wow, it's a massive amount of work, because a V4, it's not just a case of slotting a V4 in the inline four's bloody frame, is it? It's a complete redesign of everything from, when you've got a V poking its way and pipes coming up under the seat, air boxes have got to be moved, fuel tanks got to be moved, or fuel collectors got to be moved. Everything changes when you go to that configuration, which will mean that the Yamaha is no longer going to be the Yamaha. And you're right about the Ducati man appointment. That might well cut out all that development that Ducati had to do, all those mistakes that they had to make to get that bike to turn, and it didn't for years, unless he had Stoner and co on it that made it work. But at the end of the day, it didn't work for years and years and years. You'd see, the wheel would be pulled right back in the swinging arm. They'd got the thing screwed right back on some tracks. They got it shoved right forward on other tracks. They got the rake was all over the place at the front. It was trying to work out the configuration. Well, all of that will already be in the new boy's head when he gets across the Yamaha, and he's going to shorten that period of development, I would think.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because rewind 10 years, as you say, Keith, the Ducati couldn't turn, and everybody was saying it's because you've got a V4 engine. It's because you've got a 90-degree V4 engine, wasn't it? It's too big. You need to be like the Yamaha. And then here we are, Gigi figured it out. Probably the aero, I think, was a big part of it, wasn't it? And it seems like then you're able to keep all the advantages of the V4, it's slimmer and everything else. The bikes in general now, aren't they, are much longer. Whereas back then they were kind of short and nimble, so it worked well with the inline four layout. But I also wonder if the whole single tire rule is also a part of this. You've only got at the moment 2 guys on a Yamaha, haven't you? And when you've only got, they want the fast flowing lines, but you've got all these other guys on the V4s which seem to prefer the sort of stop and go style, don't you? I mean, Michelin are not going to build a tyre to suit the 5% of the grid, are they? They have to, by definition, go with the majority. And I think maybe that's a part of it. Maybe that's, Yamaha are realizing that we've got to go with what everyone else is using for that alone. Let's see how it works. They'll obviously have 4 bikes on the grid next year. A lot of riders, they'll have Jack Miller and Miguel Oliveira with a lot of V4 experience coming in. So that will be useful for them as well. And, let's see. I mean, it's such a strange one because when, I've spoken to people that work in teams that have V4s and they'll say, there's nothing on paper that says an inline 4 shouldn't be, as powerful or as good, perform as well as a V4. There's nothing, it's much more to do with, they think, the sort of the philosophy of each individual company and how they build their motorbikes and do they look for power? Do they look for handling as Yamaha traditionally did? So it'll be interesting to see what a Yamaha V4 sort of looks like. I mean, it's been a lot, I guess back to the V4, the 2-stroke days since Yamaha built a V engine. They are key. Yeah. I mean, it's, maybe they're ringing around their old engineers. I don't know what they're, how they're working on it. But also, we should just say one final thing. Mar Motors, the company that they're working for in Europe, isn't it? I think they worked on a Prius engine previously, the V4 there. They worked on Formula One engines. So they've got some clear V4 knowledge that they can bring in as well.
Experience the excitement and adrenaline of MotoGP like a VIP. With MotoGP Premier, the official ticket package provider to MotoGP, fans dive headfirst into unparalleled access at every race on the calendar. Whether you're watching the action from a grandstand or immersing yourself in Apex's Premier Lounge, all packages include exclusive behind-the-scenes experiences, from exploring the paddock and inside team garages to walking the starting grid, even rubbing elbows with riders. Every moment is designed to elevate your Grand Prix experience to extraordinary heights.
But come 2027, when you've got an 850 and it's a bit narrower and all the rest of it, that across the frame 4-cylinder Yamaha might well come back into vogue. Who knows? but they're covering off both sides of it, and I think that's very clever, very expensive, and bravo to Yamaha. I mean, fantastic. I'm so happy that Yamaha haven't taken the Suzuki route and looked at playing down their investment in MotoGP. I mean, it would be a disaster without them. Honda have looked a little bit better of late as well. I mean, that's something that seems to be moving forward. And I think the big deal as well is concessions, Pete. Next year, Yamaha and Honda have got massive concessions. And that's really going to play into the 2 Japanese factories next year.
Yeah, it looks like the concessions won't change, if you like, the cut-off points. I can't see the points allocation changing the bands that each of the factories are in. I mean, I think it will, as you say, Keith. They'll still have access to everything next year, the Japanese teams. And I think it's taking a little bit longer than some people thought. I think coming into this year, we thought with all these concessions that, suddenly click your fingers and they'll be more competitive. Clearly, it's a lot harder than that. And, but we are now, as we approach the sort of the final stages of this year, it does look like we're starting to see progress. They're being cautious about it because sometimes you see a light at the end of the tunnel and it's the proverbial train, as they say, isn't it? And there have been some sort of false turns and corners along the way. But Honda do look like they are also making some progress. Zarco first top 10 of the season for Honda, the first one since Marc Marquez in Buriram last year.
You've taken my stat away from me, Pete. I was going to come in with that. Damn it.
Sorry, Harry. Yeah, cut. Yeah, do that again.
Did you know that was actually Honda's best MotoGP result since Marc Marquez at Buriram 2023? Yeah, that was it. Yeah, so positive news.
The thing is, when we got Pete on, Harry, we can really sit back and just let him go, I suppose.
It's great. I don't have to work.
It's only a case of prompting Pete, and he'll be up with some interesting information.
But no, it is. They are making. The interesting thing this weekend is that although they're making progress, Honda, Zarco said he's still a bit concerned about acceleration. He thinks he's got braking working better now. The new fairing seems to make the cornering better, the fast corners. he's still worried about acceleration. And Mandalika is not really an acceleration track. It's more of a flowing track. Think a bit more Phillip Island, not quite as extreme as that, but that kind of thing. Motegi, exact opposite, lots of chicane, stop and go. So this will be the big test, and in front of all the bosses as well, of course. So, but yeah, Zarco is, he's leading the Honda Challenge at the moment, and in fact, Nakagami is his teammate. Obviously, is the next best Honda. So that they're outdoing the Repsol team, and who would have imagined that just a few years ago?
Positive for Honda, positives for Yamaha, positives if you are a paid Patreon member for OMG MotoGP, because this week, here, that lovely segue to the plug, wasn't it? Because this week, Wednesday, 1st of October, no, 2nd of October, I keep getting that wrong, don't I? Wednesday, 2nd of October, whatever the Wednesday is, it's the 2nd of October, I think, at 10 a.m. UK time. The whole team, so myself, Keith, Amy, Renice, are all getting together to just do a sort of half an hour chat about the season so far and answer your questions as well. You can only watch it if you are a paid Patreon member. You can watch it live, so you will be in our little group in where we do the video call. We will put the link in the Patreon website so you get access to it, and we'll answer your questions. If you can't make 10 a.m. UK, we appreciate that's not the ideal time for many, but in terms of managing some sort of schedule, it's the only one we could all agree on. We will upload the full video onto Patreon only for paid members to be able to watch back at any later date as well. So Wednesday, 2nd of October, jump over to our Patreon page. If you're not subscribed already, please do. It helps us carry on the show. And hopefully, if this goes well, we can do more and more and perhaps do them weekly as well. And you can see how all the magic comes together. You can even see how Keith does his toupee. It's really good. It takes about 10 minutes, though, at the start of the show, doesn't it?
You got everything in that little comment there, didn't you, Harry? Even a slight at me as well.
Oh, you have to do it.
I'm looking forward to that. If you think you're going to get away, sit back and it's going to be a long one. When we've got people that are in there wanting to talk, wanting information, not going to shortchange them, that's for sure. They're going to get the full-on conversations.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you something this week as well. If we're in a bit of a feel-good thing at the moment, I mean,
why not?
Andrea Iannone, when he was up against the Vizioso, if you remember, he got booted out because he was a bit of a wayward child and got himself in all sorts of trouble back at Ducati and so on. And then he had the drug situation that he got tested for, and he got booted out of the sport for, well, effectively 4 years. Back, Grand Prix man, winning in World Superbike at the weekend. I have to say, I know it was World Superbike, but at the end of the day, to see Andrea Iannone back on top, heartwarming. I did enjoy that. So I thought I'd just give that a little bit of a mention. What do people think about that situation? Because should he ever have been allowed back because of a situation where he had a drug rule against him? Or did he do his time, and is everybody happy to see him back? Personally, and I will nail my flag to the mast here, I'm very happy to see him back. I think he did do his penance because he's a great rider. Bit of a nutcase, there's no doubt about it. Self-proclaimed the maniac, and he really is, Crazy Joe. But better he's in the sport than not, for me.
Yeah, I would say for me too. I think actually I would say also Petrucci winning his first.
Well, we did mention that.
Yeah. Just to say that in 2 consecutive race weekends, you've had 2 first-time winners from MotoGP, and 2 completely different characters, but both of them great for the sport of motorcycle racing, aren't they? In very different ways. You obviously just the maniac character, as he calls himself, isn't he? And I'll say my opinion on that, Keith, on the drugs thing. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was too harsh. I think it's a bit like the tyre pressures where you're under by the smallest degree. Yes, you've broken a rule, but it hasn't changed, the results or altered your performance. And I think it's not motor racing is not athletics, and that's where I think there needs to be a separation. And for me personally, the 2 year, I think a 2 year ban was initially what the FIM gave him. I think that would have been much more appropriate, to be honest. It's still very, very severe. But yeah, to see him back winning, was it 8 years since that, the MotoGP win that he had in Austria? Yeah, I mean, great.
I think the reason why the ban was where it was because we were linked into the international, whatever it is, athletics and the like.
Yeah, WADA, isn't it, or something? I think they appealed it, didn't they? they
wanted
actually
it to
said
be
that the
longer.
FIM ban wasn't long enough, and it had to be 4 years, because I think that's some sort of standard ban. But as I say, for me, you can't compare athletics with motor racing, especially when, from what I understand, it was a technical breach of the rules, shall we say. It wasn't something where you could say, well, clearly he's benefited. I mean, I'm no expert on that, but that's just my feeling on it, is that 4 years, I mean, that's a huge amount of time, isn't it?
Well, he's back, and we're happy to see him winning. That is a fact. No headbutting seagulls from now on, though.
Oh, can we just say, though, there was a clip doing the rounds. There are these two guys on Instagram who do such a brilliant job of basically miming along and reenacting key commentary moments from every sport imaginable. And they came up on my Instagram feed the other day, and suddenly I just caught the end of it, and he's nutted it. And I was like, I know that voice anywhere. And they were doing the MotoGP, Keith Ewan, nutted a seagull. Brilliant commentary. Were you honoured to be included in that list, Keith?
I never saw it until I saw it pop up on your timeline. It's one of them ones where, I mean, there are some fantastic podcasts out there. I mean, MotoPG, I always enjoyed them, particularly when they used to rip one or two journalists apart. There are some fantastic, real niche type podcasts around, and that was obviously one of them. I'd never come across them before, but I'm glad you found it, Harry.
No, I thought you'd appreciate it. They do a lot of sort of iconic sporting moments from various different sports. I think they're two Australian guys, so they're very, very funny. And it's, I think we shared it on the OMG socials. So if you want to go back and have a look at it, Pete.
I would just say, I'm waiting for the special helmet. I'm waiting for the Ian Oney Phillip Island helmet with the seagull feathers, and he's nutted it written across the back. There it is. I want to see that at Phillip Island next year.
In Italian, yeah. I want to hear what the Italian commentary was as well. Well, while we're on just sort of off MotoGP, should we have a little gander down at Moto3 and Moto2 while we get the chance? Let's start with Moto3, shall we? David Alonso, Adrian Fernandez, David Munoz, the top three in that. And
Alonso, just class. I'll tell you what, there's a instinctive racing. When you've got that kind of way of getting yourself to the front, almost magically, there are very few riders who have that. There's a lot of riders that are determined, a lot of riders that are fast, but that magic kind of sussing out exactly where you need to be on the track to make it work on that last lap, particularly in somewhere like Moto3 when you got, it's like impossible to do half the time. But it just goes to show David Alonso again gets to the front. Surely World Championship is going to be his.
He's 97 points clear, Pete.
I was just going to say, I think they're printing the T-shirts now, aren't they? I mean, he can wrap it up. Maybe can he this weekend, or is it the next one? I'm not sure, but he's getting very close to it. It's a matter of when, not if, isn't it? Very much so. I mean, what a talent, as Keith says. Just the racecraft. I think the other riders around him must almost dread the last laps when he's there, because they just know that he always sort of comes up with the goods when the pressure's on. Very Marc Marquez-like.
Yeah, it's Daniel Holgado is chasing him, but as I said, he is almost 100 points back. Even Otola third, and a good solid season, I think, from Colin Vieja, who last year, I think, Keith, was catching your eye as well as a Moto3 rider, the Dutchman.
Yeah, it's kind of developed into a few too many mistakes for Colin. Really, I think that's the unfortunate side of it. He'll grow out of that. I'm pretty confident of it. He's definitely a star of tomorrow, if not already. To be frank with you, I mean, he certainly, the Dutch need somebody. Holland have not had. Well, you got to go back to the Will Hartog days, haven't you? I mean, Dutch riders. There's just not so many of them about now. That we've had one or two, but I think Colin Vieja is the real deal. I think he can fly. I think next year will be a year of learning. He will have learned from this year. Next year will be the year to make the performance actually count throughout the entire season.
Well, that was what was going on in Moto3. Moto2 wise, Aaron Canet, pole to the win. Iagura second, Alonso Lopez third. Pete, what did you make of the Moto2 action?
Yeah, Canet, isn't it? He gets a lot of criticism, doesn't he? Because he always seems to sort of, Bizzano summed it up, didn't it? Coming out of that last corner, and it's just always snatched away from him. And so, I think massive relief for him to get another win. I know he has had one win, hasn't he, in Moto2 previously. So yeah, he proved he can do it. He's got the speed, but it's just always something seems to happen. So yeah, it's good to see him back on top. But yeah, Iogura as well. It's all sort of heading his way, isn't it? And by contrast, Sergio Garcia, unfortunately, it's
two
just
retirements on the bounce.
Yeah, that's it. And it's very difficult when you have not just one setback, but as you say, a series of them to turn that around. And the momentum is really with Agura now.
42 points now, the gap between them. Iogura is doing it absolutely how you win a world championship. 20 points for him. Didn't need to get too involved in anything. Dixon, unfortunately, Jake got himself into a bit of trouble and down went Jake. So really that run that he was having has come to a bit of an end. So any sort of far off hopes that the likes of us Brits had that he might be challenging towards the end of the season look to be over now, it's got to be said. It looks like, again, Agura, the way he's riding and the way that he's riding to win a championship now. He's not getting himself in a mess. And if he continues that way, then he's looking like he's going to Trackhouse in MotoGP as the Moto2 world champion, which, of course, is what he wanted to do anyway. He wanted to win the Moto2 title before he went to MotoGP. And it looks like it's going his way, even though he's signed for MotoGP before he's won it.
It's the cherry on the cake, won't it, for Iogura? Let's see, though. He's got to get through Japan, Australia, Thailand, Malaysia, Valencia. It was such a shame, just coming back to Jake Dixon, he was on a proper good run. But you go back to the Netherlands, really, or even, the Netherlands, 4th, then 2nd, the win, 3rd, win, 5th, and then it kind of has been a bit of a rough couple of rounds for Jake. But, capable, as always, and a brilliant run for him. That was Moto2 and Moto3 there, and the running going on there. Pete, what else is catching your eye in MotoGP? Where do you think we're at in terms of the sport in general? I'm always keen to get a sort of bigger picture view as well. We're all waiting with bated breath about this Liberty takeover and MotoGP in general. The championship fight looks like it will well go down to the final race, which is more than you can say for other championships, although Formula 1 is actually looking pretty decent at the moment. But MotoGP always generally provides more action and entertainment.
Yeah, and in fact, you reminded me there for the question from earlier, which was why the Michelin front tyre not coming in this next year is such a disappointment, isn't it? And this feeds into the racing and everything else. And it's because that tyre, as Keith was sort of alluding to, it was designed to sort of deal with these tyre pressure issues more. It's a bigger tyre, a bit more resistant to the heat and the stress that the ride height devices and the aero put on it. And that's why there was so much hope being sort of put into this tyre that was going to come in for next year. That was the plan for it. But unfortunately, they say it just they haven't had time to test it enough. Now, it's just a shame that it's got to this situation. Obviously, front tyres are pretty critical things, aren't they? But, so you've got to get them right. But the test in Mugello was rained off earlier in the year, the official test. And then suddenly we get to the Misano test, which is the last in-season official test. And they had some allotted time. So they made everybody try it. There was no choice. You couldn't get out of it this time. Seemed to be a bit mixed. Bagnaia loved it. Some others didn't. But now suddenly they've decided, look, we need to push it back for another year. We need to work on it more. So unfortunately, for the sport, as we're saying, it's not going to help the overtaking. It's not going to help the racing because the tyre pressure issues are still going to be there. And also the bigger fluctuations mean the risk of the penalties is bigger as well. So I think that's something that's hanging over sort of next year, and something that Liberty as well. What will they think of all these, these tickers coming up at the end of the race and the results being potentially changed, the podium results? And let's remember, it would also have changed the championship points between Martin and Bagnaia if Acosta's penalty had been upheld. That would have been 4 more points for Bagnaia. So, there's a lot that these tyre pressure rules, as much as we don't like them and don't like talking about them, they have such a big influence, even if it's not directly on the two guys that are racing for the World Championship. If anyone between them in a race gets penalised, that also affects the points. Beyond that, I think the calendar has just come out. Obviously, the 25 calendar, no triple headers. That's going to be quite a change. It used to be that there was just sort of one triple header, at the end of the year. But with all the growing non-European rounds, if you like, it's got so big now that this year, well, right now we're in the middle of 2 triple headers, and it puts a big strain, I think, on the teams and the riders. Miguel Oliveira, we should say, obviously got a wrist injury on the weekend, didn't he? Traction control malfunction, spat him off the trackhouse bike. So, really unlucky for him. Sounds like quite a bad break. Let's hope he's back in time for the Valencia test. Anyway, whether he needs surgery, I think it's not quite clear at the moment. Digi is another one that's considering surgery on his shoulder at the moment. And I think if he does decide he needs surgery, he won't finish the year, because it's basically the Marquez operation that he went through a couple of years back. Long recovery time. So if you want to give yourself a bit of a head start, probably Digi after this race in Japan will have to make a decision. And so we won't see him at the end of this year either. So, I mean, the sprint race format, everything else, I think it works pretty well. But it's a lot of races, isn't it? And I mean, a lot of people, although the calendar, it's another 22 rounds, I think people are already sort of almost taking bets on which will drop away, because it would be a big surprise if all of the rounds, that have been announced actually take place. I mean, and officially 3 of them have asterisks by them, don't they? So, let's wait and see.
Keith, anything to add?
Well, I mean, I was looking at the list. Termas de Rio Hondo in Argentina, we lost that this year. It's volatile there politically at the moment, and the amount of money that gets spent by the local authorities and the like in Brazil, in Argentina, sorry. That is one that's going to be a bit of a problem. We obviously, the Great British one, the British Grand Prix moves to May, the 25th of May. Is that going to be better from a weather perspective? Well, who knows? It's England at the end of the day, and it could be anything. And it's an airfield at the end of the day. They put airfields where the wind and everything else blows quite heavily on purpose. So Silverstone have got that particular problem. Czech Republic should be back. Brno is looking like that's all done and dusted. Hungary, Balaton Park. We heard from Ben Wilshire of Driven International in our podcast earlier in the week about Balaton Park, and he says it's a really, really good facility. So that's looking interesting as well. I think that 22 is too many. I still think 20 it should be the outline. But we'll
try 24 over here. I was going through the F1 calendar next year, and I was thinking, there's a triple header. Oh, then another one. Then another one.
But apart from you shouting and hollering in the middle of it, we can sleep in the middle of that race and nothing changes by the end of it. So we're okay with that. It's not really difficult.
Oh, that's harsh. That's harsh. F1's pretty good at the moment. It's pretty good at the moment. Let's be honest.
That's why we've not seen him.
Yeah, sorry. It's not been here. Yeah.
You realise with 4 wheels, you're semi-skilled. 2 wheels is skilled. 4 wheels is semi-skilled.
You know what? I do agree. I do agree with you. I agree. And I could never do it. So
you wouldn't have any trouble touching the ground anyway.
Oh dear. Well, look, I think we'll have to sort of leave it there for the time being. I think we've covered pretty much everything. There's no glaring omissions, are there? No, I think we're pretty good.
I think you've done all right, Aaron, considering you're a part-timer nowadays.
Sorry, I'm a bit rusty, aren't I? So, it's just always nice. And we know Pete's time is incredibly precious. Pete's also just incredibly expensive. That's why we can't have him on the show all the time. So,
and I'm incredibly cheap. That's why you get me every week.
Exactly. Yeah. But look, if you are a Patreon subscriber, or indeed want to subscribe to our Patreon and help support the show, we will be doing a special live show for you on Wednesday, the 2nd of October, 10 a.m. UK, and we'd love to have your company there. If you are subscribed to the Patreon, a magic link will appear in the Patreon main page. You just click that, and then you will join at 10 a.m. UK, and you can see how we record a show, and we'll answer your questions exclusively. If you can't make 10 a.m., don't worry, you can still subscribe, and we'll upload the podcast directly to Patreon. Nowhere else. It will not get a public display, only for Patreon listeners, and it will be worth it as well. So it's me, Keith, Amy, Renita, the whole gang here. We're ready to chat with you guys and hopefully, build our rapport a little more. As always, thank you very much, Keith Ewan, Pete McLaren. It's always a pleasure to have your company. We appreciate it every single time. I've been Harry Benjamin, and until the next time, subscribe, like OMG MotoGP, and Japan this week. We'll have a preview show for that coming out later on, and 5 races to go. Who's taking the title? Take your pick.
Want an unparalleled Grand Prix experience and free signed MotoGP merchandise? MotoGP Premier has you covered.
The first 15 people to buy any official ticket package will also receive an official piece of signed team merch. Just use code OMG at motogppremier.motogp.com/OMG at checkout. Promotion ends 31st of October 2024.